because this is really a movie about memory. It's a movie about what you take away from an event, from a loss like that, and how you go on.
In 1997, James Cameron made Titanic and nearly destroyed everyone in the process. Behind those iconic scenes was a nightmare. Actors getting pneumonia, crew members having mental breakdowns, and a director who'd scream for hours over a teacup. 25 years later, the cast still can't talk about it without shaking. This is the dark story of how Hollywood's greatest romance became its most traumatic shoot. When James Cameron wanted to make a Titanic, he didn't want to make a movie about ship. Instead, he wanted to step back in 1912. In 1995, when he pitched the movie to 20th Century Fox, he didn't just talk about it. He brought a pile of books on the Titanic, showing how much he had already studied it. His plan was huge. He wanted to build a 775-foot replica of the ship, almost the same size as the real one. It would be the biggest movie set ever built. To make it work, he had a 17-million-gallon water tank built in Mexico, where the ship could sit in water that blended with the ocean, making it look real on camera. Even background extras wore period-correct underwear, even though it wasn't visible, just because Cameron wanted everything to be accurate. His obsession with realism didn't stop there. He was fascinated by shipwrecks, so before filming started, he personally went on 12 deep-sea dives to the real Titanic wreck. He even used some of the footage in the movie. One time, his sub crashed into the Titanic's hull, damaging both the sub and the ship, but he kept going. He also had a trick to make the ship look even bigger. He only hired extras under 5 feet 8 inches, so everything looked larger on screen. The movie was expensive. The budget kept growing until it reached $200 million, which made it the most expensive movie ever at that time. It was costing about $1 million for every minute of screen time. People in Hollywood thought it was going to fail. Fox executives panicked and suggested cutting an hour from the movie to save money and fit more showings in theaters. Cameron refused. He told them, "You want to cut my movie? You're going to have to fire me. You want to fire me? You're going to have to kill me." Fox got so worried that they asked another studio to share the cost. Universal turned them down, but Paramount agreed. Paramount got the rights to release the movie in the US, while Fox kept international rights. But Fox still had to cover any extra costs. Filming was supposed to take a few months, but stretched to 160 days. The release date had to be pushed back from July to December 1997, which only made the studios more nervous. Cameron even offered to give up his $8 million salary just to keep the movie going. The president of Fox's parent company later admitted that they weren't even hoping for a big hit anymore. They just wanted to break even. The production of Titanic was long and exhausting. It was supposed to take 138 days, but it stretched to 160, ending on March 23, 1997. The reason was the size of the film and how much control James Cameron wanted over every little detail. He kept pushing for perfection, which meant long hours and very little rest. The crew worked 6 days a week, often for 13 hours or more each day. Night shoots were especially tough because they had a limited time to film in the dark. Many people were so tired they started falling asleep during safety meetings. The crew even gave Cameron a nickname, Midge, which was Jim spelled backward, to mock how demanding he was. But Cameron didn't care. He believed hard work was the only way to make the movie exactly how he wanted. Things were even worse because of how little time people had for breaks. They often had to skip lunch, working straight through meals. Even bathroom breaks were a problem. Cameron reportedly told actors not to leave the set during lifeboat scenes. saying they could lose their jobs if they did. This put everyone in a tough spot, especially when filming in the huge 17-million-gallon water tank. Kate Winslet and others later admitted they had to urinate in the tank instead of leaving for the bathroom. Even extras had it bad, with Cameron joking about tying them to the set so they wouldn't waste time. It made for a stressful and uncomfortable work environment, but no one wanted to complain because they knew how important the movie was. One of the hardest parts of filming was being in the cold water tanks for long hours. To make the scenes look realistic, Cameron used water that was colder than usual, about 13 degrees Celsius. That wasn't as freezing as the actual ocean that night, but it was still very uncomfortable. Most actors wore wetsuits under their costumes, but Winslet didn't because she wanted her performance to feel more real. This led to her getting pneumonia. The actors had to stay in the water for hours since it took too much time to get them out for breaks. The longer they stayed, the colder they got. Some started feeling sick, but they had to keep going. Many people suffered health problems from the tough conditions. Winslet got pneumonia, chipped a bone in her elbow, and was even scared she might drown in some scenes. Others got colds, flu, and kidney infections from being in the water too long. The stunt crew had it rough too. 3 of them broke bones while filming. Some of the biggest risks came from the flood scenes. In one, thousands of gallons of water came crashing through a glass dome, which could have easily gone wrong. Many crew members couldn't handle the conditions and quit. The ones who stayed were exhausted, sick, and overworked. Some even fell asleep during important safety meetings, which made things even more dangerous. Despite everything, the film kept moving forward because Cameron refused to slow down. He didn't care how difficult things got. He wanted everything done his way. Kate Winslet's time filming Titanic was full of challenges, and one of the scariest moments happened on December 12, 1996. She was shooting a scene where Rose and Jack are running through a flooding corridor as water rushes in. Her costume was heavy and got stuck in a grate. The water kept rising, and for 45 terrifying seconds, she was trapped underwater, struggling to free herself. She thought she was going to die. Thankfully, the crew noticed and quickly pulled her out. Even though she was shaken, she didn't stop filming. But the long hours in freezing water started to take a toll on her health. By January 1997, she developed pneumonia. Her body temperature had dropped dangerously low, and she needed urgent medical care. Doctors told her to rest, but she was determined to finish the film. After just 3 days, she was back on set, still sick, still pushing through. She spent up to 12 hours a day in cold water, which weakened her immune system for months. Even after filming ended, she kept getting sick, dealing with bronchitis throughout 1997. The physical pain didn't stop there. During filming, she suffered multiple injuries. One of the worst happened on September 23, 1996. She was filming a scene where Rose tries to break Jack's handcuffs with an axe. Her aim was off, and she ended up chipping a small bone in her elbow. The pain lasted for weeks, but she kept going. As the months went on, her body was covered in bruises. By November 1996, she had so many that the makeup team started using them as reference points to match scenes. In early December, things got even worse. She spent an entire week being slammed into walls and debris while filming the ship's sinking scenes. The bruises on her arms were so bad that she later said, "I looked like a battered wife." But she refused to let anyone else do the tough scenes for her. She wouldn't use a stunt double, even when she had to wade through ice-cold water for hours. By the end of filming in March 1997, she had suffered at least 40 different bumps, bruises, and injuries. Her performance wasn't just acting, it was pure endurance. But it wasn't just the physical challenges that made things hard for her. There was also the emotional toll, and part of that came from how she was treated behind the scenes. James Cameron, the film's director, was known for being tough, but one thing in particular hurt Winslet deeply. On set, he reportedly gave her a cruel nickname, Kate Weighs a Lot. People said he used it multiple times between August and November 1996, especially during scenes where she had to be lifted or carried. She was only 21 years old, already struggling with body image, and this made things worse. At 5 feet 6 inches and around 180 pounds, she wasn't overweight, but Hollywood's beauty standards made her feel like she was. This nickname wasn't just a joke. It led to even more body shaming from the media after the movie came out. Years later, she admitted that growing up, classmates had bullied her by calling her blubber. And the attention on her weight during Titanic brought back those painful memories. Cameron later denied ever saying it, but the damage had already been done. The experience shaped her views on body image, and she became a strong advocate for body positivity. She now refuses to let her photos be airbrushed and speaks out against unrealistic beauty standards in Hollywood. Despite everything, Winslet never gave up. She was determined to finish Titanic, no matter what. On October 17, 1996, a major storm hit the outdoor set in Rosarito Beach, Mexico. The wind and rain destroyed parts of the set, forcing production to stop. But instead of taking a break, Winslet joined the crew, helping them rebuild for 14 hours straight. She worked insane hours, sometimes up to 20 hours a day, refusing to take shortcuts. One of the hardest scenes came on December 28, 1996, when she had to repeatedly jump into freezing water. They did over 20 takes. She could have used a stunt double, but she wanted the scene to be real. Even when she got pneumonia, she ignored the doctors and kept filming. When the movie wrapped in March 1997, she thought she was finally done. But in June, 3 months later, she volunteered to come back for extra scenes, even though she was already working on other projects. Winslet's dedication came at a cost. She missed important family moments, including her sister's wedding, because the filming schedule kept dragging on. But she never regretted it. Years later, in a 2017 interview, she said, "Titanic was a film I was determined to see through, no matter the cost." That determination helped make the film what it was, one of the biggest movies of all time. Meanwhile, James Cameron wasn't sure about casting Leonardo DiCaprio in Titanic. By 1996, DiCaprio was already a well-known young actor with films like What's Eating Gilbert Grape and The Basketball Diaries, but Cameron had doubts. He imagined Jack Dawson as a tough, working-class artist, and he thought DiCaprio looked too polished, maybe even too soft for the role. He actually considered Matthew McConaughey instead. DiCaprio's audition changed everything. On June 24, 1996, he did a screen test with Kate Winslet. The second they started acting, something clicked. Their chemistry was obvious. Cameron later said that in that moment, it was like the clouds opened up and the sun shined on Jack. But even after that, Cameron wasn't completely convinced. He kept testing DiCaprio, making him audition multiple times. He even had him act out extra scenes just to see if he could handle the role. One of those moments, where Jack sketches Rose, wasn't even in the script at first, but Cameron liked it so much that he added it to the film. But it wasn't just Cameron who had doubts. DiCaprio wasn't sure about the movie either. He was 21 years old and focused on smaller, artistic films. He didn't want to be seen as just another Hollywood heartthrob. When Cameron first offered him the role, DiCaprio actually said, "I don't do love stories. I don't do period pieces." He thought the script was too simple, and he didn't think Jack was an interesting character. He even asked Cameron if they could change Jack's backstory to make him more complex, maybe add some trauma or a flaw. But Cameron refused. DiCaprio almost turned the role down completely. On August 12, 1996, he had a serious conversation with Cameron about his concerns. But it wasn't just Cameron trying to convince him. Kate Winslet also stepped in. She had already been cast as Rose and believed in the project. She kept calling DiCaprio, trying to get him to change his mind. She even tracked him down at a hotel to talk to him in person. In the end, it was her persistence, along with the challenge of working on such a massive film, that convinced him to take the role. Filming started on September 1st, 1996, and it wasn't easy. The water scenes were especially tough for both DiCaprio and Winslet. Most of them were filmed in a giant water tank in Rosarito, Mexico, holding 17 million gallons of water. Even though they heated it to 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 27 degrees Celsius, spending hours in it every day made the actors miserable. Winslet got pneumonia and almost quit. DiCaprio was constantly sick and exhausted. The hardest scenes were the ones where Jack and Rose are in the freezing ocean. They filmed those over 7 nights, from March 18th to March 24th, 1997. To make the water look even colder, the crew added a chemical that made it appear like steam was rising from it. But the chemical irritated the actors' skin and eyes, making things even worse. Cameron wasn't very sympathetic. He had a rule. If you're not wet, you're not working. The set was so stressful that at one point, a crew member spiked Cameron's soup with PCP, sending him and 50 others to the hospital. DiCaprio and Cameron also clashed a lot. Cameron was strict and wanted everything planned, but DiCaprio liked to improvise. On October 15, 1996, they argued over a scene where Jack and Rose run from rushing water. DiCaprio wanted to change his lines, but Cameron shut him down, refusing to change anything. Another big fight happened on November 28, 1996. DiCaprio didn't want to wear a wetsuit under his costume for the water scenes because he thought it would ruin his performance. Cameron insisted. They argued for hours, delaying filming. In the end, DiCaprio gave in, but their relationship stayed tense. By early 1997, DiCaprio was exhausted. The long hours, the freezing water, and Cameron's perfectionism were getting to him. He started showing up late. On January 8th, Cameron finally snapped. In front of the entire crew, he called out DiCaprio and threatened to fire him if he didn't take things more seriously. After that, DiCaprio became more professional, but the tension between them never fully went away. Even though they butted heads, both of them later admitted that it helped the movie. In 2017, Cameron said, "Leo and I fought a lot, but I want actors who care about their characters." DiCaprio also said that Titanic taught him how demanding big films could be. The experience wasn't easy, but in the end, it created one of the biggest movies of all time. In August 1996, something crazy happened on the set of Titanic. It was the last night of filming in Nova Scotia, and around midnight, the cast and crew took a break to eat. About 80 people sat down to enjoy a seafood chowder that everyone thought tasted amazing. Some even went back for second and third servings. But what they didn't know was that someone had laced the food with PCP, a powerful drug that makes people hallucinate. At first, no one noticed anything strange, but within 30 minutes, things started getting weird. James Cameron, the director, was the first to realize something was wrong. He had only eaten one bowl, but he still felt sick. Thinking it was food poisoning, he forced himself to throw up. That might have saved him from the worst of it, but for everyone else, it was too late. The drug kicked in, and chaos took over. People started acting completely out of control. Some were laughing hysterically, while others were freaking out. One huge crew member, over 6 feet tall, was screaming that something was inside him and needed to be pulled out. The usually serious electricians and grips were stumbling around, talking nonsense. Even James Cameron, normally strict and in charge, was running around, shouting things that made no sense. Actor Bill Paxton, who played treasure hunter Brock Lovett, was caught in the madness too. There was nothing anyone could do to stop what was happening. Things got even wilder when the drugged-up crew members were rushed to the hospital. Around 1 a.m., the emergency room at Dartmouth General was suddenly flooded with people who were completely out of their minds. The doctors had no idea what was going on. One of them, Dr. Rob Roy, later said, "These people were stoned." They had no idea what was going on. The hospital, usually quiet at night, turned into a circus. Some crew members started a conga line, dancing through the hallways. Others grabbed wheelchairs and raced each other down the corridors. Bill Paxton, instead of panicking, just sat in the hallway, smiling and enjoying the ride. Meanwhile, the film's cinematographer, Caleb Deschanel, was so high that he led a group of people in a spontaneous dance routine. And then there was James Cameron. Even though he had tried to get the drug out of his system earlier, he was still feeling the effects. At one point, a crew member stabbed him in the face with a pen, just for fun. Cameron later said, "I'm sitting there bleeding and laughing." The doctors tried to calm everyone down, but it was impossible. People kept running away from their hospital rooms, refusing to stay put. As a last resort, the medical staff gave them activated charcoal to absorb the drug and hopefully bring them back to reality. The big mystery, of course, was who did this. Investigators tried to find out, but it wasn't easy. The Titanic crew left Nova Scotia soon after, moving production to Mexico. That made it hard to track people down. Cameron later said he believed it was revenge. A crew member had been fired the day before for causing trouble with the catering team, and he thought that person poisoned the food to get back at them. There was also talk about a food services worker who had been kicked off set for selling drugs. Some even speculated that the whole thing was planned to delay filming so the production could claim insurance money. But no one was ever caught. The case was closed in 1999, and to this day, no one knows for sure who did it. Surprisingly, the incident didn't really slow down the movie. Some even say it helped in a weird way. The cast and crew, after going through something so insane together, became closer. Even James Cameron, who was usually super strict, seemed different for a while. 2 days after the incident, people spotted him on set at 4 a.m., holding a bottle of scotch, looking completely exhausted, something no one had ever seen before. The unexpected day off also gave him time to rethink some scenes. When filming started again, he decided to reshoot parts of Bill Paxton's introduction. Those changes helped improve the final version of the movie, but some people were still shaken up. Marilyn McAvoy, the artist who created Jack's sketches of Rose, said she had mild flashbacks for months. Bill Paxton, in later interviews, would always bring up the incident, still in disbelief that it actually happened. The biggest impact, though, was on Hollywood itself. After Titanic, movie sets became much stricter about food safety. Catering companies faced tighter rules, and productions started watching their food suppliers more closely. No one wanted something like this to happen again. James Cameron was known for being tough on set, but during the filming of Titanic, his temper was on another level. Just 3 weeks into the long and exhausting shoot, on August 9, 1996, he suddenly fired 50 crew members because he thought they weren't working hard enough. The remaining crew called it Bloody Friday. From that day on, everyone knew the set would be a stressful and intense place to work. Cameron wanted everything to be perfect, and he didn't care how much pressure that put on people. His anger came out in different ways. On September 25, 1996, he got furious over a teacup. A prop master had placed the wrong type of teacup in a scene, and Cameron spent 45 minutes yelling at him. People on set said his face turned bright red as he shouted so loudly that everyone could hear. A few weeks later, on November 12, 1996, he lost it again. This time, it was over a door. An extra kept making small mistakes while closing a door in the background of a scene. After 23 takes, Cameron lost his patience. He stormed onto the set, slammed the door shut himself, and then kept showing how to do it over and over again. The whole thing went on for almost an hour, while everyone else stood there in silence, afraid to say anything. But the worst moment happened on December 3, 1996. During a night shoot, a lighting technician fell asleep. Cameron saw him, grabbed him by the shirt, and shook him while shouting, "If you can't stay awake, I'll find someone who can." Security had to step in, and the technician quit immediately. Cameron's outbursts weren't rare. For 7 months, he kept pushing people to their limits. He wanted every scene to be exactly the way he imagined it, no matter how hard it was on the people around him. Even the actors felt the pressure. Kate Winslet, who played Rose, later admitted, "There were times I was genuinely frightened of him." One of those moments happened on October 18, 1996, during the famous "I'm flying" scene. They had been filming in freezing water for hours. Winslet was shaking from the cold and asked for a break. But Cameron snapped, "You want a break? Then get off my set." She was too afraid to argue, so she kept going. By the end, she was so cold that she had mild hypothermia and needed medical attention. Leonardo DiCaprio also struggled under Cameron's strict direction. On November 30, 1996, he was having trouble with an emotional scene. After 36 takes, Cameron finally exploded. "Do you want to waiter the rest of your life, or do you want to be an actor?" he shouted. DiCaprio was so upset that he left the set and locked himself in his trailer for hours before coming back. Even Bill Paxton, who had worked with Cameron before, wasn't safe. On January 7, 1997, during an underwater scene, he made a small mistake, and Cameron yelled at him for 10 minutes straight. Paxton later said that, for the first time in his career, he thought he might have a panic attack on set. Extras had it just as bad. On December 12, 1996, during the sinking scenes, an extra fainted after standing in cold water for too long. When someone told Cameron, he just said, "Leave him. We'll shoot around him." That moment made a lot of the background actors afraid to work on set. When Titanic came out on December 19, 1997, everything changed overnight for its stars. Kate Winslet was only 22, and suddenly, the whole world was watching her. At first it seemed like a dream, but in reality, it was overwhelming. Years later, she said it was horrible. The media made her feel like she had to look and act a certain way, and it made her life miserable. The worst part was how much they focused on her weight. The tabloids wouldn't leave her alone. One British newspaper even printed her supposed body measurements on the front page in early 1998. That kind of pressure wasn't just uncomfortable, it was damaging. She later admitted it gave her an eating disorder. She felt like she had to keep up with impossible standards, all because the media wouldn't stop talking about how she looked. And it wasn't just headlines. Paparazzi followed her everywhere. In March 1998, She got into a minor car accident in London while trying to escape photographers. It wasn't serious, but it made headlines all over the world, making the attention even worse. Leonardo DiCaprio had his own nightmare. In April 1998, he had to get a restraining order against a woman who broke into his house 3 times. She kept saying she was his wife. Fame wasn't just exhausting, it was dangerous. All this attention affected their personal lives, too. Winslet's relationship with actor Stephen Tredra fell apart by the end of 1997. DiCaprio, meanwhile, couldn't go anywhere without the press making up stories. In July 1998, rumors spread that he had been in a bar fight. It never happened, but the story spread so fast that his publicist had to step in and deny it. Even though Titanic was breaking records, making over $2.2 billion and winning 11 Oscars, not everyone from the cast could enjoy it. The experience of making the film had left its mark. Billy Zane, who played Cal, later admitted that after filming, he kept having nightmares about drowning. It got so bad that in 1999, almost 2 years after the movie came out, he checked into a sleep clinic because he couldn't sleep. Frances Fisher, who played Rose's mother, had a different problem. After spending months filming in water, she developed a fear of large bodies of water. In 2022, on the 25th anniversary of the Titanic's sinking, she admitted that she hadn't been on a cruise or even visited a beach since filming ended. The memories were too strong. Instead of feeling proud of Titanic, she felt guilty that she couldn't enjoy it like everyone else. Even DiCaprio, who became one of the biggest stars in the world because of Titanic, struggled with what came after. In 2000, he admitted he felt trapped by fame. He turned down huge movie roles because he was afraid he'd always be seen as Jack Dawson and nothing else. And it wasn't just the actors who suffered. Even behind the scenes, people were dealing with the aftermath. Russell Carpenter, James Cameron's cinematographer, later admitted he had panic attacks just from hearing the sound of rushing water. The months of filming flooding scenes had gotten into his head. For a lot of them, therapy was the only way to deal with what they went through. In 2017, on the 20th anniversary of Titanic, some of the cast revealed that they had gone to group therapy together. Talking about it helped. It made them realize they weren't alone. The film was a masterpiece, but the experience had changed them forever.